Jackys Retail is a household name in the UAE with about 600 employees worldwide. From humble beginnings back in 1970 in Hong Kong, it has come a long way in being the leading trader and retailer in the Middle East, Far East, South Asia, and Africa. Today, we have the COO of the company joining us here in the London project, as you can see in the gorgeous Blue Waters Island, Ashish Punjabi. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome to the second episode of Up to Data. Such an incredible journey. If you can, in a minute or two, take us through the evolution that Jacky has had over the years.
So basically, we started off in Hong Kong in 1970. We just turned 50 last year. And we started off as a mail order company. And then the journey into retail was accidental. So we got into retail in 1988 only because the building where our first shop opened, we had our office upstairs and the store downstairs vacated.
Okay.
And the landlord came and said, "You want to open a store?" And we looked at it, we said, "We've got all the goods in the warehouse. It's good for cash flow to have some rotation." And we opened a store.
Oh, wow.
And that was the journey of how we got into retail.
Amazing, incredible. But you've also had a whole digital transformation journey, right? Like obviously from being mail orders to a retail store that was accident. How did your entire digital journey start and when did it start?
So I think a lot of things happened as an evolution over time without us actually thinking of it in that way. I think a business always evolves, and I don't think of it as a transformation. It's a constant evolution that keeps happening. And with that evolution, we saw things change. So we went online in the year 2000.
Okay.
And we went online not because we were ahead of the curve or because we were retailers or anything else. It was because we were selling from catalogs.
Right.
And it was more efficient to start having the catalog online because the prices on the catalog were printed once a year and were getting outdated. Products were getting outdated.
Yeah.
And the website was a far better way to sell.
Was there demand at that point though online?
So we were probably a little too early.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of things that we were trying to work out at that stage. So in terms of talking to payment gateways, in terms of talking to hosting providers, in terms of cybersecurity, I mean, these were all the early stage issues that we went through.
Sure.
Logistics, the last mile deliveries, these things didn't exist in the region. So we went through a lot of work at that stage in terms of getting that in place. But for us, yeah, we did see business happen. Business out to the US, Korea, but then we saw Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and other places wake up as well.
Okay.
So we did see the demand come in from there, from that. And we were retailers at the same time. And we saw at that time the transition from the souk retail model to the shopping mall.
Yeah.
And when you saw that happen, you saw basically the rise of organized retail. And when you start to get into organized retail, you start to see yourself investing in various other areas of the business within the retail store. So then you suddenly invest in store design, marketing, training, people, inventory management, logistics systems. And it's a constant evolution that keeps going on from there onwards.
Sure. So since you said that you started going online back in 2000, what I want to know is it ever too early? Do you feel like there is the right time or the earlier the better?
Well, there has to be the right time, I think, at the end of the day, because the investments have to make sense. And the one thing that happens is, as you move on a little later on, a lot of those fixed costs actually start to reduce and become nominal or fractional of what they were at that stage.
Okay.
And today, if you were setting up, it would cost you far less than it would have done 10 years ago. Because it's that much easier to set up now, and you've got that much more in terms of choice and competition available, even from the service providers that you work with.
Sure. I mean, the reason I'm asking you is I was having a conversation with Mark Tessiman, and he said that, a lot of retailers did go online way back, but then they had to, and they made all of the investments in going online. It's not cheap, it's not inexpensive. And then later on, when 2020 happened, the game shifted, the kind of technologies that were needed changed drastically. So then it was additional investment. So do you think the cost increased substantially because you started early?
So I think it goes on industry by industry. Electronics and retail had to go online years ago. If you look at every marketplace that's come up in the region, you look at Amazon, Noon, etc., the first category they hit on was electronics.
Right.
It was mobiles. It was buying an iPhone or a Samsung phone or a laptop online.
Yeah.
And this is where you sort of saw the first part start. So as retailers, if we had to to remain in the business, we had to be online.
Right.
So though we were there in the year 2000, most of our competition came on board 2007, 8, 9, 10. And by the time 2020 hit, most of us were on version 3, 4, or 5 of our online strategy.
Right.
Compared to the other sectors where they were starting with version 1 in 2020.
Yeah.
So I think we had the advantage of learning and we had the advantage of evolving far more over that period.
Sure, but do you think electronics as a retail vertical is one that can only reside online? Is that how consumer behavior is changing at this point? Because I know even now when I go to a store, just my personal behavior as a consumer is I go to a store and then I touch and feel the product and then I end up ordering it online because in most cases I do find it cheaper online. So is that a trend or a behavior that you're seeing?
So, I mean, we've seen this journey change as well. And the best thing with the internet was it democratized everything. And the main thing was information. So the information became readily available. One of the reasons we went online in the year 2000 as well and started selling was when we wanted to get product information, we couldn't find it.
Right.
So we started putting a lot of it up on our website.
Okay.
And we saw in the early 2000s the benefit in our retail stores because people were coming into our store and not everyone wants to talk to a salesperson. And we would literally see people come into our store. In those days, we had our flagship store in Garud at the airport road. And people would come in with printouts on the website.
Oh, really?
And they would say, these are the products I've seen and I want to see it physically now.
Okay.
Because there was a touch and feel aspect that still had to be there.
Sure.
So we saw that at that time. As things have moved on now, it got into price comparisons, it got into other things. And when we talk about showrooming, when people come into a store and then look online, showrooming over here was a little different a couple of years ago. Showrooming over here meant you go into a specialty store, you look at the product, and inevitably there'll be a hypermarket either one floor below or on the same level, and then you go there and you look at the product over there.
Okay.
And you compare the price because you say, I've got the demo and the experience over here, let me go pick it up over there.
Okay. It's not like that anymore though, right?
Now you're seeing the actual next step of showrooming where it then became, let me check the price online. But the one thing is it has to always be an apple-to-apple comparison. And at times it isn't always that. But I think the consumer is getting more educated where they start to realize that. And a lot of the prices are actually getting a lot more uniform today.
Right.
Once upon a time, you would see the online prices were down here and retail prices were up here.
Yeah.
And what started to happen over the period was the price gap shrunk.
How? Like, did the online price go up? Or?
This is the point. The issue was a lot of the online retailers were using this as a loss leader, the electronics and IT category. It was a way of getting business in. But you don't get loyalty that way. You've got a one-time purchase, and then the person disappears.
Sure.
It's not groceries or something like that where you sold him milk and then he's going to buy milk the next day and the day after that.
Yeah.
You're not going to see him for the next
year or two at least,
for the
right?
next year or two.
Yeah.
So a lot of them realize that you can't sustain that. And we've seen it with so many of the e-com pure play retailers that came in. They all came in with this. They all went with the loss leader category. And then eventually you saw the prices here start to go up and here start to go down. But the prices from the online guys actually went up far more than the drop in price from the retailers.
Oh, right, okay. But the way it's happening is quite seamless, right? Because we as consumers, we don't really notice the drastic change in prices.
Well, because there's new models that come in, you don't see it there. It's not a constant product that stays there for 15 years.
Yeah.
So every time a new model comes in, they reprice it. So that's when the chance to recalibrate pricing comes in.
Yeah.
So we probably see that twice a year because most model cycles change twice a year.
Understood.
So with that, you start to see that. And at the end of the day, there's a core fundamental in business is you need to be profitable. And the online retailers also realize that at some stage is you could only run a loss leader for so long.
Sure. I mean, it sounds like you made Omni cool before it was actually cool, like back in 2000 when we weren't even talking about the whole Omni channel.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't like the word Omni retail, and I've never liked it because as much as people called it Omni retail, there was always a division within most organizations on how the online team worked versus how the physical retail team worked.
Yeah.
And for me, retail is retail is retail. it's all the same across. Retail is being about where the customer is.
Yeah.
And if the customer is in your store, if the customer is on your website, if the customer is on a marketplace website, you need to be wherever the customer is. The reason as retailers we're in different mall locations, in different store locations, is because we know the customers are there and they've got different profiles of customers.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing online. So you know the customer is not going to only come to your website, they're going to go everywhere else.
Yeah.
And then it's a question of you treat the others like a shopping mall and you go on there and sell from there as well.
But it's interesting you mention it, because at least some of the online chains we've seen here that have legacy brands as stores, what they sell on stores or the language that they have and the feel that they have in the store is so different from what they have online. For example, a brand has a certain essence as a store because they've built it over the years, but suddenly online they're trying to cater to a different crowd. That's why they lose their brand identity. I'm not sure if you've noticed it, but then we've noticed it over the years with doing mystery shopping segments, etc. But so like you said, there is a difference, right? Like it's not the same philosophy online and offline, but how do you amalgamate that?
So this is where I come back. It's all retail at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same thing in physical retail as well. You can go to your flagship store on in a premium location,
Yeah.
and your store product mix will be different to what you may have in a mass market location. So even though you're the same chain store and you're selling the same brand,
Yeah.
the products you keep on display may be different over there.
Yeah.
Because the profile of your customer is different. And it's exactly the same thing online as well.
Right.
So when you add the online mix into it, even now we sell online, we sell across various platforms online. We don't keep the same products on every platform. We distinguish, and we've done this.
And you're saying that's okay. Consumers won't get confused with
Not at
what
all,
Jacky
not at
says.
all. I think you need to give them what they want in the right places. So we learned this, and again, one of the early examples is we were selling on Souk.
Okay.
When Souk was making the transition from being an auction player to starting off as a marketplace. And we were one of the first reputed retailers to go on there.
Right.
Or maybe the first at that time. So we started listing our products on Souk. And to our surprise, we started getting orders from Souk that we'd never sold online on our own website in all those years. It was a completely different profile of products.
Right.
We'd have people buying a battery. No one ever came to our website to buy a battery, but they were going to Souk to buy a battery.
Yeah.
They were buying a case, a charger.
Right.
And then on our website, it was more the actual main product. So we realized it's a whole different audience on Souk in those days.
Oh wow, that's quite interesting. But let me come to another topic. Recently we did a story about Jackys selling 2 new robots, which are home assistants essentially. Let me not talk about the products. What I want to know is how automation and, because it's always been a fascinating topic, even in 2021, robotics, automation, how is that really being used in retail with regards to the back-end operations? And do you think it's being used enough?
From a retail perspective, where does robotics fit in? Now, a robot is like a smartphone. It's a piece of hardware with cameras, sensors, motors, and it runs an operating system.
Right.
And these cases, in most cases now, it's running on Android. Now, like your smartphone is good, but it can't do anything without the apps built around it.
Yeah.
And having the connectivity to different ecosystems. And this is exactly the same thing with robotics. Is you have that piece of hardware and those sensors and those cameras, and it's what you do with it and the apps that you start to build on it.
Yeah.
So we're actually working with a community of developers in the region to build out solutions that can be worked out. Now, if I take it in a retail context, that robot has a camera. It could recognize you when you walk in the store.
Yeah.
It could give you a personalized greeting. It could make a personalized recommendation because it knows your previous purchase habits, because
Right.
you're part of the loyalty scheme in that store. So it links into the CRM system.
Yeah.
It'll tell you the special offers that are there. It'll alert someone in the store that you're there. It'll tell you where something is in the store, if in case you want to go find it.
Yeah.
And it could even finish the payment transaction.
Sure.
Now, compare that with the normal scenario. Today, you walk into a store, you're seeing generic advertising and generic promotions. my kids don't wear Pampers anymore. I don't need to see ads for Pampers. But
Yeah.
but that might be the first thing I see when I walk into the store,
Yeah.
an ad for Pampers. And then I go through my whole journey, and I get to the cashier, if I make it to the cashier,
Mm-hmm.
and I take out my loyalty card, and that's the only time they've actually realized I've been in the store.
Too late, yeah?
So you miss out on everything that could have happened in that process.
Yeah.
The entire upselling opportunity, the accessories, the add-ons, everything else. And this is where the robotics actually does the job well. So a simple example with Pepper. They did a thing with Dolce Gusto in Japan,
Yeah.
where the robot would understand your coffee habits,
Oh, really? Okay.
what you liked, how you take your coffee, etc. And it would make a personalized recommendation of a coffee for you. And by the time the robot was done with that, a store associate would come with that cup of coffee and greet you, and then take care of closing the sale from there onwards.
Okay.
So instead of going through the whole process of trying to understand what's the right thing for you, and let the robot do that,
Yeah.
and the salesperson actually focus on what they do best.
Right. Oh, wow. It's so interesting what you said. Like with all of the loyalty cards we use, we actually just use it at the end of the process when we reach the cashier.
Exactly.
But do you think that process can change? Of course, you mentioned with the robots how it could change. But even with using loyalty cards or any of the loyalty schemes, how is it possible that as soon as a customer enters the store, that you understand the customer, you know what they want, and then you guide them in the right direction, so the propensity of them reaching the cashier or the conversion is almost guaranteed?
This is the one thing that in 2020 a lot of retailers have understood, is we start to think more like consumers.
Yeah.
Because when everything was disrupted, we ourselves are consumers at the end of the day. We started to actually rationalize and empathize with the consumer in terms of how we want to go in.
Yeah.
And suddenly then it became about efficiency in the store, and being in and out as quick as possible, because you don't want to be out longer than you have to at this time. So understanding that you can't have people around, you can't have as many store associates as you want at any given point in time. Understanding you can't have store staff who speak all the different languages, but you can have the automation that can do that.
Yeah.
And being able to connect that, and then work on that. And like I said, it's working with the different systems that you have. So if it's not facial recognition, it could be scanning your loyalty card and then getting served over there.
Every customer is just so different. Every customer needs that sort of personalization, and we're getting spoiled as consumers, right? We expect that from retailers. So how do you cater to all of these varying demands? And also, we were talking about this yesterday, that data can only predict or can only assess what's happened in the past. It's not a crystal ball. It can't really predict what is going to happen in the future, with customer demands changing so rapidly. And every customer, especially with what you are doing, right? Like the millennials, Gen Z, they demand so much, and everything that's available to them with regards to electronics, etc., it's changing so much. How do you cater to these changing demands? How do you keep up, rather?
So there's two things. I mean, one is, we're moving away from the age of everything being generic, and we're getting into a stage of personalization. But we also don't want to be a victim to the algorithm. Yeah. And I think this is the big thing that's there, is you can go down that slippery slope where you say an algorithm figures out everything, and then you end up actually limiting yourself because you don't realize the value of impulse. Yeah. And this is something as retailers we recognize, is you need to have some spontaneity, and you need to have something outside the usual flow in there, because you never know who's going to buy what.
Yeah.
The big thing is, I think in the last year, a lot of the resistance that was there to these changes came from within organizations. And a lot of those barriers are now gone. Yeah. Because people have now realized, and like I said, we are all consumers at the end of the day, and we now realize exactly what it means.
Yeah.
And a lot of those barriers went, and a lot of those reasons of why not to invest disappeared. Yeah. And it became, why didn't we invest? Why haven't we invested? So you're seeing that big shift happen in terms of change. The biggest difference between an online-only retailer and a physical retailer was access to data. The online retailers had all the data. They knew exactly how many people came into a website, how long they spent, what they looked at, in all of that, and physical retailers didn't have that. Yeah. Today, with everyone investing across channels, so a robot today can actually give you the information of who's interacted with it without them even saying anything or asking for anything. because the camera technology can estimate, is it a male or a female?
Yeah.
Approximately what's their age, and what questions were they asking?
Yeah.
So then you figure out, okay, what could the robot answer, or what couldn't it answer, or what didn't we have in the store?
Yeah.
And this is where you start to get that data gathering in there. And once you start to aggregate it, you start to get a much richer data source, because it's like going onto a website and you look for a product and you can't find it. The only way the online guy knows they don't, you were looking for something that they don't have, is if you went in the search box.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's exactly the same thing in the store now.
Right.
Till now, as a physical retailer, you relied on your staff to tell you what are people asking for that you don't have.
Yeah.
And then you're depending on their memory, and whether they understood or didn't understand.
So now the robot is that search tab.
It is in that sense, and it's starting to get a lot of that data and that feedback, because it has also the voice interactions that it can convert to text and keep with it and share that.
Oh, that's very interesting. Again, so consumer experience benchmarks have risen drastically, right? Like we were talking about it a little bit earlier about how with AI recommendations, etc., when you go on YouTube, you're not searching anymore. You search once and then they just keep recommending, and then you keep consuming that content. But that's happening literally everywhere, with advertisements, with content, with everything. So at this point, do you think you as a retailer are shaping how a consumer behaves, or is it the other way around? Is the consumer telling you how to behave?
Well, it's always customer first.
You say that, but...
No, but it is that, because if you don't do that, the customer's got enough choices, enough alternatives to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
So you need to be listening to the customer, and you need to focus on the customer needs first and foremost. And if you look at it, what does the customer want when they come in? They can get a lot of the information online. They want to come in for the touch and feel.
Yeah.
They want to come in for the comparison, the physical comparison.
Yeah.
They want to come in for the service queries that they've got. They want to ask the questions that they can't find on a website.
Yeah.
And you need to be catered, and you need to have your staff trained, and you need to have your merchandising done accordingly, and you need to have the right resources available to cater to that in the store.
So online is obviously about convenience and transactions, where you can just quickly pay, buy, etc. But stores right now are supposed to be experiential, right? That you, as a retailer, your aim is to try and get them to spend more time in the store, and of course purchase items as well. For an electronics retailer, is that a difficult feat to achieve, considering there's so much traction coming in terms of buying online?
So it goes with certain products. Things like mobiles. Everyone knows what an iPhone is, or a Samsung S21. You see enough people with it, so you sort of figure out, and you can buy that online.
Yeah.
So the value addition of coming in the store may not be as much. You're buying a television, how do you compare the picture quality?
Yeah.
And I remember I was in Silicon Valley a couple of years ago, and the CTO of Flipkart was there before it was acquired by Walmart in India. And he was saying, if anyone here can develop any sort of technology where on a mobile phone screen you can tell me the differences in picture quality across different TVs, we'll buy you.
Yeah.
We'll buy you immediately. We won't even ask questions.
Yeah.
Because you can't demonstrate that yet. And this is what retail does best, is you can come in there and you can put the volume up, and you can look at the picture quality, and you can see it in different phases and decide this is the right product for me, and go for it. You take the home appliances category, even more difficult, because most people don't know how to buy for that category as much, and they want to have that thing there, because once you bought a fridge, it's sat in your house for years, and if you bought the wrong fridge, you're going to be regretting it for years.
Yeah.
So the value of the trip of coming into the store and having a look at it and realizing whether it's the right one and whether it fits correctly, and the small details, does it have a built-in water filter or not? A water dispenser, does it have a built-in ice dispenser, or is it only a tray? All those little details start to come in. Does the door open in the right place?
So can't all of those be quantified in the description?
You could do, but again, not everyone goes through it. Not everyone reads the details as well. And sometimes you want to come in and actually see it. And then how do you compare? Again, that satisfaction of saying, I went in there and I did that, because trying to lug a fridge back is not an easy exercise.
Yeah.
You've taken up 5 flights of stairs, through a service elevator, brought it up.
Yeah.
Maybe had to unhinge the door to fit it in
Yeah.
and take it in and say, oops, I got the wrong one.
Right, absolutely. I think we're running short on time right now, but just one last question for you. What do you see are the main trends that are going to dominate 2021? A, when it comes to electronics retail, B, in terms of retail technology in general?
So we're seeing quite obviously the rise of 5G.
Yeah.
And everything is going down the 5G route. And the UAE is one of the leading places for this in the world. With the Expo coming at the end of the year, the focus is quite strongly on 5G.
Yeah.
So we're going to start to see the integration of 5G technology coming into a lot more places. And it's not only your mobile devices, but it's also your cars. It's in other things that you use on an everyday basis. And the value of that connectivity is only going to continue to increase.
But how is 5G going to impact the way you do your operations as a retailer?
Well, 5G will give us the flexibility, example, to have pop-up stores, work from home, and all of those things work a lot more efficiently.
Yeah.
So a classic example, we used to be in Jackys Shopper in the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
We would pay a hell of a lot of money to have those data lines in there and connecting up each and every stand and having 120 point of sale terminals in place and all the work into connecting it. And if it could just run off individual 5G connections, it would make my life a lot easier.
Yeah.
You could set up in minutes what would take days to set up. And you would have the speed and the efficiency of that. So those are the type of things that happen. The other thing is because everything is moving to the cloud for everyone. Even for us as retailers, a lot more of our information is in the cloud now. That connectivity gets a lot better. Right. That speed gets a lot better. The efficiency in transactions can only improve. So we will see that from there. But the consumers as well, because also what we've seen in the last year, and the demand for our technology went up. People who are working at home, they needed the laptops. They're on Zoom, they needed webcams. They're watching Netflix a lot more, they needed better televisions and faster devices. So we've seen all of this. We've seen it with the gaming market. We've seen it with all of that. And that's only going to continue. We've created habits that aren't going to change, that are going to stay there in the long term. And the technology has been at the heart of a lot of this. And with 5G, we're going to continue to see that change over there. Today, you're used to talking to Siri and waiting for that 2 or 3 seconds for an answer.
Yeah. With 5G,
that will be instantaneous.
Yeah.
And you start to think of everything else that could be instantaneous in that case. So even though those milliseconds start to disappear.
Honestly, I'm a little worried about how we as human beings are going to evolve with 5G coming in, with zero latency and, faster speeds, etc. Like the way we think, already social media is doing that, in the grander scheme of things. Our memories have become worse than it was before. We don't know what's going to happen with 5G, but I guess that's great for business for now. But again, thank you so much, Ashish, for joining us here. It was a pleasure talking to you, learned so much, and it was a very, very insightful conversation. And thank you to all our viewers for joining us once again on Up to Data. We will be back again next week.